said there's a lot of environmental factors, obviously different to what we face here. It's mainly heat, but where you're from, you've got a lot of pretty harsh factors in winter that you've got to contend with.
Yes, sir. Yeah.
What sort of challenges do they present, particularly when you get blizzard conditions?
Yeah, so obviously the main challenge is cattle comfort, and there's a lot of money spent on assets to keep the snow moved out so we can keep feed trucks moving, and obviously we have to keep feed coming into the feed yards. We don't have a lot of excess feed in inventory at most of the feed yards. It's not raised locally. It's railed in, and so we've got trucks moving nearly 7 days a week, and maybe a 2-day supply at best of the feeds. And so feed supply becomes a big issue in the blizzard type conditions.
Okay. How about the supply of feeder cattle? You also touched on that and said that can be a big issue in getting quality cattle into your system.
Yeah, absolutely. And so the U.S. through the drought, and a lot of it too is driven, in my thought, is around the next generation of farmers, ranchers. We just don't have the young people interested, as well as issues around being able to find financing today to put together the next generation. It's very disheartening, but more importantly has been the environment. We've been dealing with a lot of drought, and then of course we had just another major blizzard up north in the Dakotas that took out many beef cows, and so this all does lead to some very big supply challenges for us.
And getting to the crux of the issue, I guess what you touched on was illnesses and working of hospitals.
Yes.
In the feedlot. How big a factor is preconditioning and backgrounding to ensuring that your cattle are in good condition when they go into the feed yard?
Yeah, that's critical. We looked at the upstream supply of cattle and what they could do for us in preconditioning were very important factors. Looking at parasite control as well as the vaccination programs could have a tremendous impact, along with cattle learning how to drink out of a waterer and drink out of a feed bunk before they got to the feed yard were tremendous assets for us and really helped us to keep cattle healthy.
Another thing you touched on that was very interesting was immunity variation when you're dealing with big numbers of cattle from different points of origin. How is that something, or how do you deal with that sort of issue?
Well, very poorly at best, I'll be honest with you. We don't have good diagnostics to be able to determine, as cattle coming off the truck, what are their immune status. And so really we looked at historical figures and then the current state of affairs. Obviously drought is a huge issue for us right now, and so these cattle are micronutrient as well as vitamin deficient as they're coming in, and many of them too have just had a lack of calories and protein nutrition, and so all those lead to a deficiency. And then once they get to a larger population that we would have in the yard and the exposure to new viruses, bacteria, it could be a recipe for some very difficult times.
And Sam, just a final question. You touched on home pen versus hospital pen and some of the advantages in trying to get the cattle back into shape in their home pen. Can you give us a bit of information about that?
Well, the key to that is that as we're bringing cattle into the feed yards, that's the time that they're at greatest risk of having a respiratory disease event, which is the most common disease that we deal with in the U.S. Industry. That is also the time that obviously they're developing new social structures if they've been commingled with other cattle from the sale barn, and as well as then we're going through an adaptation period. Obviously the rumen is the important digestive organ for them, focused on bacteria and the protozoa, and so in that process we need those cattle in the home pen so that they can go through all that adaptation process together. So our interventions for disease can many times be a greater detriment, in my opinion, than what would be going on if we just left them alone in the home pen. And so we really focused on identifying the cattle, and it's a much smaller population that truly needs antimicrobial intervention at the time of this disease event. And going back to that lung lesion data, we can see that there's a high prevalence of lesions in cattle we never treated relative to those that we did. There's still a lot of cattle that we've treated that did not have pneumonia. I'm not saying they weren't sick, but it wasn't a pneumonia event. And so that's what we're really focused on, is trying to reduce in the judicious use of the antimicrobials that we have in place.